Shame has been lying to you your whole life. It whispers in the back of your mind, telling you that you're broken, unworthy, and not enough. But here's the truth. Shame is not who you are. It's a story you've been taught to believe, and today, that story loses its power.
You see, most people confuse shame with guilt, but they are not the same. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. One is about behavior, the other is about identity. That small difference can change the entire course of your life, because guilt can guide you, it can help you make amends and grow. But shame buries you. It convinces you that no matter what you do, you are unworthy of love, success, or forgiveness, and that is the most dangerous lie of all. In this video, we're going to break that lie apart. We're going to explore where shame really comes from, why it takes root so deeply in your mind, and how to loosen its grip once and for all. By the end, you'll see shame for what it is, a mask you never needed to wear, and when you take that mask off, you'll finally feel what it's like to breathe freely. Now here's something most people never realize. Shame is not always yours. Much of it was handed to you, maybe from your family, maybe from society, maybe from old systems that made you feel wrong for simply being yourself. The truth is, shame often doesn't begin with you. It begins with the voices you trusted, and over time, those voices became your own, but they were never your truth. Think about this. Research shows that shame activates the same parts of the brain linked to physical pain. That's why shame feels unbearable. It literally hurts your body. But here's the hopeful part. Studies also show that when people practice self-compassion, even something as simple as writing a kind letter to themselves, the weight of shame begins to lift. Not just for a moment, for weeks. Imagine that. A simple act of self-kindness rewiring years of self-criticism. Yet most people never try it. And there's another hidden truth. Shame thrives in silence. The more you hide it, the stronger it grows. That's why so many of us carry it for years. We think, if anyone knew the real me, they'd walk away. But the opposite is true. The moment you bring shame into the light, whether by writing, speaking, or confiding in someone safe, it starts to shrink. It cannot survive exposure. So why should you watch this video till the end? Because I'm not just going to tell you that shame is a problem. I'm going to give you the tools to dismantle it. We'll talk about how to tell the difference between healthy shame, which keeps us accountable, and toxic shame, which keeps us trapped. We'll dive into the strategies psychologists use to break the cycle, and we'll uncover the one mindset shift that can transform shame from your enemy into your teacher. But let me warn you, what you're about to hear might challenge the way you've seen yourself for years. It may feel uncomfortable at first, even strange. That's how you know it's working. Shame resists being questioned because once you question it, you'll realize it was never the truth. Picture this, a child growing up, being told over and over that they are too much or not enough. That child grows into an adult who feels small even in their biggest moments. That's the cost of shame. But picture the same child hearing, you made a mistake, but you are still loved, you are still worthy. That child grows into an adult who knows how to take responsibility without drowning in self-hate. That's the power of replacing shame with compassion. And here's something very few people know. Toxic shame doesn't just harm your mind, it can erode your health. Chronic shame is linked to anxiety, depression, even immune system problems. But when people learn to separate their mistakes from their identity, their mental health improves dramatically, their relationships deepen, their confidence returns, because when shame loses control, you finally start living instead of hiding. So as you continue with this video, stay with me. Every minute will take you deeper into understanding how shame works and how to break free from it. You'll learn practical tools you can start using today. You'll discover stories that prove you are not alone, and by the end you'll see why shame no longer has to control you. Before we talk about the walls you need to build to protect yourself, let's start with the words you speak to yourself. Because what you whisper in your own mind every single day shapes the way shame lives inside you. Most people are harsh with themselves in ways they would never be with another person. They say things like, I'm worthless, I always mess up, I'll never be good enough. And the more those words repeat, the deeper shame digs in. But here's something that may surprise you. Research shows that when you write a letter to yourself filled with compassion instead of criticism, your brain begins to shift. The same voice that once crushed you becomes the voice that lifts you. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just imagine you're writing to a close friend who is struggling, someone you love. You wouldn't tear them down, you would lift them up. So why not give yourself the same kindness? Take a moment and write. I know you've been carrying a lot. I know you've made mistakes, but those mistakes don't define you. You are learning, you are growing, and you are worthy of forgiveness. At first it may feel uncomfortable, maybe even fake. That's normal. Your brain has been wired by years of criticism, so speaking kindly to yourself feels unnatural. But the more you practice it, the more it becomes real. Think about it this way. Shame thrives when your inner voice is cruel. But the moment you switch that voice to one of understanding, shame begins to shrink. Because shame feeds on silence and judgment. When you flood it with compassion, it has nowhere to hide. A single kind letter, written in red, can plant a seed strong enough to push shame out of the shadows. Now, before we move further, let's talk about the second piece of this puzzle, boundaries. If writing a kind letter is how you soften the inside, boundaries are how you strengthen the outside. Boundaries are not about shutting people out, they're about letting the right people in. Yet so many people fear setting boundaries. They think if I say no, I'll lose love. If I speak up, I'll be rejected. But here's the truth, boundaries don't hurt you, they heal you. Imagine a garden with no fence. Anyone can walk in, trample the flowers, throw in weeds. That garden doesn't stand a chance. But put up a fence, not to keep the beauty in, but to keep the harm out, and suddenly the garden thrives. You are that garden. Without boundaries, people's judgments, expectations, and shaming words walk right in and crush your growth. With boundaries, you protect your worth. You make space for your real self to bloom.
And here's something powerful. Shame often grows because others cross lines that should never be crossed. Maybe someone spoke to you in a way that made you feel small. Maybe someone demanded from you more than you could give. Maybe society itself set standards so unrealistic that you could never live up to them. Each time those lines were crossed, shame grew louder. But boundaries are how you tell the world, no more.
A boundary might be as simple as saying, I can't take that on right now. Or the way you spoke to me isn't okay. It might be walking away from people who only remind you of your failures. It might be limiting how much time you spend in spaces that fuel your self-doubt. Whatever form it takes, a boundary is not rejection, it is protection. It is self-respect in action.
And here's the part people rarely realize. When you set boundaries, the people who truly value you will respect them. The ones who don't were never safe to begin with. That's how you separate those who drain you from those who help you grow. And the more you protect your space, the more room you create for healing. So think about it. On the inside, you are rewriting the voice that shame once controlled, turning cruelty into compassion with a simple letter. On the outside, you are building fences strong enough to keep harm out and love in. These two practices together, inner kindness and outer boundaries, are not just steps toward healing, they are the foundation for living without shame as your master. Every time you pick up a pen and write something gentle to yourself, you're training your brain to see your worth. Every time you say no to something that violates your peace, you're reminding the world and yourself that your worth is not up for debate. That is how shame begins to lose its grip, slowly but surely, word by word, boundary by boundary. For most of your life, you've been told to push certain feelings away. Anger, suppress it. Sadness, hide it. Fear, pretend it's not there. And shame, bury it so deep that no one, not even you, can see it. But here's the truth. Every time you push your feelings down, you give them more power. What you resist persists. What you hide grows stronger in the dark. The path out is not through hiding but through accepting. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean you're happy with what happened. It means you're brave enough to say, yes, this is how I feel, and I'm strong enough to face it. Acceptance is not weakness, it's the turning point. Psychologists know this. Studies show that people who acknowledge and name their feelings recover faster from emotional pain. Why? Because acceptance brings the hidden into the light. The Guardian once shared a story of a man who felt unlovable his whole life. Not because of who he was, but because the world around him made him believe he was wrong for existing. For years he carried that shame like armor. But the moment he admitted, yes, I feel this shame, but it isn't mine to carry, everything began to shift. By accepting the feeling, instead of running from it, he took away its power. Very Well Mind explains it simply. When you embrace your emotions, you stop being their prisoner. You're no longer spending energy pretending, hiding, or numbing. You free up that energy to actually heal. Think about how exhausting it is to wear a mask every single day, to smile when you're hurting, to say you're fine when inside you're drowning. That performance is draining your life force. Acceptance tears the mask away. It says, I don't need to hide anymore. And in that moment, shame begins to shrink. But here's the part most people miss. Acceptance is not the end. It's the beginning. Once you accept your feelings, you create space for the most powerful antidote we have, self-compassion. And let me be very clear, self-compassion is not weakness. It's not letting yourself off the hook. It is one of the strongest, most courageous acts you will ever take. Because it's easy to beat yourself up. It's easy to say, I should have known better. I should be stronger. I should be perfect. That's what shame wants you to believe. But it takes real strength to look at yourself and say, I am human, I am imperfect, and I am still worthy of love.
Think about a child who falls while learning to walk. No one screams at that child. No one says you're pathetic for falling. We encourage them. We cheer them on. We help them back up. That's compassion. And yet when you fall as an adult, when you fail, when you make mistakes, you attack yourself with words you'd never use on anyone else. That's not strength. That's cruelty. Real strength is choosing compassion instead.
The science backs this up. Studies show that people who practice self-compassion have lower levels of anxiety and depression and higher resilience in the face of setbacks. Why? Because compassion is fuel. It gives you the energy to keep going when shame would rather see you stuck. It's the difference between quitting because you aren't good enough and trying again because you deserve another chance. Let me give you something to hold on to. Shame screams, you are not enough. Self-compassion whispers, you are already enough. And when you start listening to that voice, everything changes. You stop seeking worth in other people's approval. You stop measuring yourself against impossible standards. You stop punishing yourself for simply being human. You begin to live. But here's the catch. Compassion takes practice. It won't feel natural at first. If you've spent years being your own harshest critic, kindness will feel foreign. You might even resist it. But just like a muscle, the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Start small. The next time you feel shame, pause. Instead of saying I'm a failure, try I made a mistake but I am learning. Instead of I'm broken, say I'm healing. These tiny shifts in language open the door to transformation. And remember this, acceptance and compassion are partners. Acceptance says, this is what I feel. Compassion says, and that's okay. I will treat myself with care. Together they create the foundation for freedom. You don't need to escape your emotions. You don't need to deny them. You need to embrace them with courage, and then meet them with love. That is how you transform. That is how shame begins to dissolve. Not by force, but by a strength so powerful, it doesn't need to shout. Shame thrives in silence. It feeds on the moments you keep your struggles hidden, convinced that no one could ever understand. But here's the truth. Healing does not happen in isolation. Healing happens when you step into connection. The walls you build to keep people from seeing your pain also keep you from receiving love. And without love, shame only grows stronger. Think about it. Have you ever carried a secret for years, believing it was too heavy, too ugly to share? Then one day, you open up to someone you trust, and instead of rejection, you find acceptance. In that moment, the weight shifts. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it becomes lighter because you're no longer carrying it alone. That's the power of connection. Trusted people, whether friends, mentors, partners, or support groups, become mirrors that reflect back your worth when you can't see it yourself. Very often, we underestimate how deeply human beings are wired for connection. Our nervous systems actually calm down when we're with people who make us feel safe. That's biology, not just psychology. When you share your story with someone who listens without judgment, your brain registers safety, and shame begins to lose its grip. It's as if your body finally exhales after years of holding its breath.
But here's what makes this even more powerful. Connection doesn't require you to be perfect. In fact, it demands the opposite. Real connection only happens when you allow yourself to be seen, messy, imperfect, and real. Vulnerability is the bridge, and though it feels terrifying to cross that bridge, it's the only way to reach the other side where healing waits.
Now let's step back and ask a bigger question. Where did the shame you carry actually come from? Because here's something you may not have considered. Much of your shame was never yours to begin with. Society has a way of planting shame like seeds in your mind. From the time you were young, you may have been told you were too loud, too quiet, too emotional, too different. Maybe you didn't look like the images plastered across magazines. Maybe you didn't fit the mold that culture demanded. Slowly, those outside voices became your inner voice, until you believed the lie that something was wrong with you. The Guardian once told the story of a man who grew up believing he was unlovable, not because of anything he did, but because society labeled him as less. He carried that shame into adulthood, even though he had people who loved him. That's how powerful social shame is. It convinces you that external prejudice is an internal flaw. And unless you recognize it, you live your entire life blaming yourself for wounds that were never yours to carry.
Think about how many standards the world places on you every single day. You must look a certain way, succeed a certain way, love a certain way. And if you don't, you're made to feel unworthy. That's not your failure. That's society's distortion. Shame in many cases is a reflection of cultural prejudice, unrealistic ideals, and systems designed to keep people small. When you finally see that, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "Why was I made to feel this way in the first place?"
And this is where connection becomes even more essential. When you surround yourself with people who challenge those false standards, people who accept you as you are, you begin to rewrite the script society handed you. In safe connections, you discover that your worth is not dependent on perfection, appearance, or performance. It is inherent. It is unshakable.
Here's something extraordinary. Studies show that shame loses its intensity when shared with empathetic listeners. That's why group therapy, support circles, and even close friendships can be transformative. The act of hearing someone else say, "Me too," breaks shame's illusion that you are alone. Because isolation tells you, "I am the only one." Connection reminds you, "I am not alone, and I never was."
So ask yourself, who are the trusted people in your life? Who can hold space for your truth without judgment? Who makes you feel seen instead of small? These are the people who will help you dismantle shame piece by piece. And if you don't have those people yet, remember this, they are out there. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes searching, but connection is always possible. Healing happens when you let yourself be known, and freedom begins when you stop carrying society's shame as if it were your own. The world may have handed you a story that said you are less, but in the presence of true connection, that story begins to unravel. And as it unravels, you begin to see the truth that was there all along. You were never less. You were always enough.
Pride is not a dirty word. Somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that feeling proud of ourselves meant arrogance, ego, or selfishness. But real pride, the kind that comes from honoring your growth, your effort, and your resilience, is not arrogance at all. It is medicine. Pride is the reminder that you are more than your mistakes, more than your scars, more than the shame that tries to silence you.
Think about the way shame works. It drags your attention to the darkest corners of your life. It forces you to replay your failures over and over, like a broken record. It magnifies what makes you small and blinds you to everything that makes you powerful. But the truth is, you cannot heal by obsessing over what diminishes you. You heal by focusing on what lifts you. You heal by remembering the things you've overcome, the times you kept going when quitting seemed easier, the days you showed up for yourself even when no one else noticed.
Take a moment to ask yourself, what are you proud of? Not in comparison to anyone else, but for you. Maybe it's the fact that you survived something you thought would break you. Maybe it's the way you've kept compassion alive in a world that often feels cruel. Maybe it's the small daily acts of courage that no one claps for but you still choose to do. That is pride. That is strength. And when you allow yourself to feel it, shame has less room to grow. Here's a powerful truth. Your brain pays more attention to what you focus on. If all you feed it is shame, self-criticism, and judgment, that becomes your reality. But if you start feeding it pride, gratitude, and acknowledgement, the pathways of your mind begin to change. It's not wishful thinking, it's neuroscience. By focusing on what makes you proud, you train your brain to see possibility instead of punishment. Now let's talk about something people rarely distinguish, the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. Believe it or not, a little shame has a purpose. Healthy shame is that quiet voice that reminds you when you've crossed a line, when your actions may have hurt someone else. It's not meant to crush you, it's meant to guide you back. Healthy shame says that choice wasn't aligned with who you want to be. Let's do better, and when you listen to it, you grow. But toxic shame, that's an entirely different beast. Toxic shame doesn't just say you made a mistake, it says you are the mistake. It tells you not that you did something wrong, but that you are wrong. It doesn't guide you, it imprisons you, and instead of helping you take responsibility, it convinces you that you're beyond repair. That's why toxic shame destroys. It strips away hope and leaves you stuck in self-hatred. The challenge is that most of us never learn to separate the two. We take the natural human feeling of healthy shame and let it spiral into something toxic. Instead of saying, I shouldn't have done that, we start saying, I am worthless. That tiny shift in language carries massive consequences. One path leads to growth, the other leads to despair. But here's where pride comes back in. Pride is the counterweight to toxic shame. It reminds you that no matter what mistakes you've made, they don't erase the good you've done, the love you've given, or the progress you've achieved. Pride pulls you back into balance. It tells you, yes, you stumbled, but you are still worthy. Yes, you made a mistake, but you are not defined by it. Think of pride and healthy shame as partners. Healthy shame keeps you accountable. Pride keeps you afloat. Without shame, we risk never learning from our actions. Without pride, we risk drowning in guilt. But toxic shame disrupts that balance entirely, convincing you that there's nothing worth being proud of in the first place. That's the lie. That's the trap.
The truth is, there's always something to be proud of. Always. The fact that you're still here, still searching for growth, still listening to words like these, is something to honor. Pride is not about ignoring your flaws. It's about refusing to let them overshadow your strengths. It's about standing tall in the light, even when your mind wants to drag you back into the dark.
So, focus on what makes you proud. Let pride be your compass. Let healthy shame be your guide. And when toxic shame tries to pull you under, remember this: you are not the mistake. You are the lesson, the growth, and the victory that came from it. You are enough, just as you are. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You don't need to hide your scars or silence your feelings. The moment you see yourself with compassion, shame begins to lose its power. If this message spoke to you, if it gave you even a glimpse of freedom from the weight you've been carrying, then take a moment to like this video. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these words. And don't forget to subscribe to Intuition Decoded, where we bring you the truths that help you grow, heal, and rise above the lies shame has told you. Stay with us, because your journey doesn't end here. It's only just beginning.